5-minute round. Eric, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to go back to Mr. Walsh, and I'd like to pick up on something that my colleague, Mr. Vidal, was asking, and in terms of how we measure success of Nutrition North and of these programs. And Mr. Walsh, you mentioned tracking the cost of the food basket, tracking the amount of food in the North, which are obviously very important aspects of this. But I do think overall that, of course, the goal that we should be tracking is food security for those in the North. And I think that if that is not our primary focus with these goals, then perhaps we're missing the mark a bit, and perhaps there is a bit of a lack of a focus on building capacity in northern communities. So I'd like to ask what sort of mechanisms are you using to monitor food insecurity across the North, and in order to respond to that issue more directly?
Okay, well, thank you for that. I think the reality is food security is a complex issue that requires lots of partners and to collaborate and come together with solutions. Nutrition North Canada is a retail subsidy. It's one aspect in what we think requires a suite of actions. So in and of itself, Nutrition North is never going to solve food security. That's why we've introduced things like the Harvester Support Grant. That's why we're working with our federal colleagues at Canor on the community innovation stuff, with our colleagues over at AgCan on the national food policy, and obviously with our Indigenous partners. We are, like I mentioned before as well, I think the number one cause of food insecurity in the North and in Canada, frankly, is poverty. And so we need to engage with other partners in order to address that core issue. And so I think, taken as a whole, is the approach that we need to take. Now, in terms of providing data as a program, we've got our metrics and we follow our Treasury Board reporting requirements on the program itself. But certainly we do keep an eye on think tanks and other agencies nationally who track food insecurity rates in the North and in Canada.
Thank you, and I do agree with a lot of what you just said, particularly in terms of poverty being a real issue, and that I think it shows why we need to do more. I think to increase economic activity, create more opportunities for jobs and more opportunities for prosperity across the North. Unfortunately, over the past few years, I think that this government, frankly, has opposed many opportunities for development in the North. So I'm wondering if you could speak more to a plan to develop the North and to create some more opportunities, so that, like you said, we can have a more wholesome approach to addressing this issue.
Great, thank you. That's a great question. We launched in 2019. The government announced the Arctic and Northern Policy Framework. It's a co-developed policy approach between the government of Canada and Northerners to map out a roadmap for sustainable social and economic development in the North between now and 2030. And so the Arctic and Northern Policy Framework has 8 goals and multiple objectives, and we are now in the process of co-implementing that framework with our partners, which includes territorial and provincial governments as well as Indigenous governments, to make progress against that framework. And the framework looks at things like, some foundational infrastructure requirements. It looks at things like economic development, education, attainment levels, health, reduction of poverty, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a framework in place, a comprehensive framework in place that's been developed with our partners, and that's what's really guiding our work right now to advance the North and those goals and objectives in the Arctic and Northern Policy Framework.
Just 10 seconds left, Eric.